Hello, students. Welcome back. In the second section, Michael and I are going to discuss some really famous photos around the world, at least to our knowledge. So, Michael, why don't you start with your ideas?
Okay, I think one of the most famous photographs took place in Times Square after World War II. And it totally captured the mood of America at that time after being engaged in the war from 1941 to 1945. Although the war had started earlier in 1939 with Germany, but for us it really began in 1941 with the invasion of Pearl Harbor. But the essence of this photo of the man and the soldier, Navy guy, kissing the woman in Times Square there captured the mood that, and we all felt very happy. We can all move on now into our future, go back to work, raise our family, have jobs, get the economy going again, and so on. So I think that photo was very, very significant in that sense.
And powerful. And
very powerful, yes.
Yeah, I think the major effects of the photos is just that they capture some particular moments and particularly historical moments. So, well, once when these photos were released in newspapers or in magazines, we just saw these photos and had a really strong impression of what happened then. So, in the reading, the writer also mentioned a case about 2 or more photographs regarding the Tiananmen Square thing. So I think that photo, particularly with a man holding 2 bags and standing in front of a line of tanks. So that photo showed the tension between the government and people. And later, as we can see now, some government or some countries actually denied what they did in the past. But we can say, oh, it's all recorded in these photos. How could you deny that these things actually took place, something like that?
And I think it's very similar nowadays, even with our U.S. government and our president denying certain things happen because of photos and so on and so forth. And I think when we were discussing this earlier off camera, we talked about the similarity between Emily Davidson standing in front of the King's horse and then the man in Tiananmen Square standing in front of the tanks. The similarity between the two, although probably the guy in Tiananmen Square had never heard of Emily Davidson either, just like I hadn't before we started researching this. So there are certain similarities, and when you see these photographs, you talked about how strong and powerful they are in this moment of time, and that was really true for the case. The sad part is that the result is the government denied that it ever happened, even though there is proof that it existed. Now, I don't know what the logic is behind that unless the government does not want to admit that they made a mistake in handling it in front of the citizens, okay? So, but that comes with the culture and with the type of government as well. So, anyway.
And also, I think recently, one artist also used the image of that photo, but created something like mural or graffiti just at the side of a house. The artist actually used the image, but that's different. So now with the tank, it's pile of goods made by China. So the artist is complaining about now we get lots of goods or products released by China, but those cheap products actually shows the oppression of the workers. And the man in front of the tank is now carrying 2 plastic bags, and well, with words, free trade or fair trade on the plastic bags. So of course, the artists recycle this image, but deliver something similar, like in this artist's message
Yeah,
or
more current
manifesto.
message about what's happening today, because I think Tiananmen Square was, what, 1989 or so? So we're talking
86 or 7?
yeah, somewhere, well, it was over 20 years ago
Yes.
anyway, so, and things have changed. We've already gone through 2 more generations of people, so, but there are a lot of other photographs too, and photos can, as we said with World War II, the one in Times Square can show something positive and emotional, but it can also show negative images too. And I speak specifically of the Vietnam War, where, in my opinion, we never should have gone there, of course. But there are a couple of photos that come to mind that were very strong images, both in a negative sense about what happened. One I can relate to is where I think it was a Viet Cong supporter or participant being shot by a Vietnamese soldier or policeman, shot in the head right there. And you could see the impact of the bullet as it hit the guy's head and kind of forced him off to the side like that. The second one is of the young girl fleeing from her village after it was bombed and her skin's on fire from the napalm. These 2 images stick out in my mind as though I just saw them yesterday again. I mean, these things are burned into my mind, I think, forever. Photos have the power to show positive and negative sides
So
of life.
as you just said, when we see these photos again, we probably get something like to refresh our memories or what we have been through at the same period of time. So particularly, well, in the U.S. context, of course, the Vietnam War brought out lots of things U.S. Americans are still congesting right now. So the influence of the war could be really, really long, and it takes perhaps a long time for other people to get through it or truly to know what's behind the war.
Exactly. That's an excellent point you bring out. Even though it's not related so much to photography, when the war ends, it doesn't mean that the war is over for people who are in it. We have lots of people with traumatic stress syndrome, not only from Vietnam War, still dealing with that, but also from our actions in the Middle East, in Iraq and Afghanistan and so on. And speaking of Afghanistan, we have also a famous photo from there.
Yes, there's a really young girl. So you probably remember her beautiful eyes. That photo was taken when she was 16 or 17.
Yeah, I think it was on the cover of Time magazine, right?
No, it's on the cover of National Geographic.
Oh, National Geographic, okay.
And maybe several years ago, I think it's the same photographer found her again, and they take a recent photograph of that. Now it's a woman, and she seems tired and exhausted after trying to make her living or survive, right, during these 20 or 30 years. So that helps to bring us to more reflective, right, approach to what's happening in that country. It seems right distance from like maybe the United States or maybe from Taiwan, but we need to remind ourselves, right, there are people struggling over there, and we should pay attention about how some countries and how other parts of the world people are doing over there.
Very true, very true.
So I guess Mike and I have discussed some really famous, right, photographs, right, during our second discussion. So as usual, we have 2 questions for you. So Mike, why don't you start with your first question?
Okay. I mentioned 2 photographs that brought out the horror of war, especially specifically during the Vietnam War, what two photos were they?
And I mentioned a particularly photo that has been used, right, for artists for later alterations for art creation. Which photo or which incident that photo refers to? That's the end of our second section. See you.
Bye.